So my name is Sam Wright, and I am the chairman of Reform UK Southampton.
Thank you very much for coming along for this interview. It's greatly appreciated. It's been about a year since the general election, and Reform did increase their vote share in both of the constituencies in Southampton, Southampton Itchen, and Southampton Test. Over the sort of last 12 months, what sort of support have you seen, and what have you heard on the doorstep?
The doorstep has been a very interesting experience, actually. I don't know if you know this about myself, but I actually did campaign in the local elections last year in Peartree Ward. And I have to say the difference from the local elections to the post-general election, and even after our recent elections this year, it's been fantastic to see the difference. And you can, when we have, say, Nigel Farage or Richard Tice saying the momentum is there, we can genuinely see it and we can genuinely feel it. On the doorstep, we have quite an interesting mixture of people who are almost despondent, saying, how the things are going, we just can't imagine it's going to stay like this for another 4 years. And then you have other people who, in the same vein, will say, actually, if it wasn't for Reform UK, we wouldn't bother voting. So even kind of tapping into that feeling of apathy, but actually that we do present an alternative. So it's a very, very interesting in that perspective how it's growing. And even in more, almost what you'd call quite moderate people, they are starting to see what Reform has to offer.
And what issues are you hearing most that people are concerned about?
I think quite poignantly, devolution and local government reorganisation. I think quite a few people have seen what has been done to other kind of counties and how the local elections this year were affected, and how many areas lost their opportunity to vote. So I think quite a few people were even thinking that whilst this was a gap year, or a fallow year, as it's called, that actually we lost the right to vote. People are genuinely terrified that our democracy is being affected. And obviously reassuring people, no, that wasn't the case this year in Southampton. But there is that concern for next year.
And do you think it's something that will, through these delayed elections, will have actually an effect on when the elections are eventually held, because people will be not especially happy about that delay? Do you think it will sort of change the outcome, how it would have been if the election had happened as scheduled?
I think it's very easy to say yes, but actually I would say I guess from there are many perspectives on why someone might do this. Obviously, I don't think many people fully know, but I do suspect that the delay could have an effect, and much to some people's surprise, it may work out in our favour, perhaps. But that being said, the reorganisation, I think, will be like scrambling eggs. We just can't say how it will turn out, and I think it could have a chance of backfiring on Labour as well. So I think that's something to bear in mind.
And what have people sort of spoke to you about the proposed reforms to the sort of structure in terms of Hampshire County Council?
I think there, especially when we have people from, I do interact with some of our branch members who are from Hampshire, and the wider kind of Hampshire area in the New Forest. And I think there's kind of this feeling of disbelief and this concern that obviously a rural issue is going to be very different to an issue in, say, central Southampton. And I think when the initial proposals were put ahead, there was kind of this concern, well, okay, as obviously we don't know the full final proposal just yet. Hopefully August or September we'll actually get some more answers on that. But even the proposal of maybe having Portsmouth put into the mix, wider areas, perhaps even the Isle of Wight, although it looks like that's now going to be more of a special case in itself, I think did concern a lot of people that, and even with a mayor, that there may not be the same priorities or the same attention on local issues anymore.
I suppose, of course, Southampton is a very, it's quite large, relatively, outside London. It's one of the largest cities outside the southeast. So this obviously this decision doesn't come lightly to reorganise things, but obviously that will come with inevitable risks. Is there sort of I suppose these issues are obviously connected, but is there any kind of stance from Reform's end on these proposed reforms, or is it waiting to see what the final decision is?
I would say that officially it is waiting to see what it would really turn into. I think we all have voiced our concerns on this within, say, our branch internally and within, say, wider Hampshire group. But as an official, say, press release or any kind of message of whether we support or we're against it, I think we want to see how the proposals actually shape up before we kind of issue any formal response.
So there's obviously been disruption in Birmingham with bin collections. Is there a sort of, and there are issues with Southampton City Council in terms of budgets and it being in debt and things like that.
Massively.
Yeah. Are there concerns? Well, I suppose there are concerns, obviously, but what would be the way of correcting that reform?
Well, I think to kind of reference a famous quote, it's the economy, stupid. I think with the way that councils are obviously working with their very limited budgets, and that's something which unfortunately has been the case since kind of 14 years of Conservative control in central government, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better in Labour's kind of current situation. I can appreciate, obviously, that people are finding it harder to get by. We need to have higher wages, but that doesn't seem to be taking place in all sectors, and the public sector especially. I think that with the case of Birmingham, it's a difficult one, because it's very easy to turn around to somebody and say, well, you know, if you're in a very well-paying job in a big tech firm, well, you know, we've just not had a good year. You know, sorry, we can't give you that pay increase or a bonus. But when there's this expectation, I think, created by the current government to hand out large sums of money in pay increases and bonuses across many sectors, train drivers in London being referenced quite a lot, and junior doctors as well. When Labour first took over, getting some sizable pay increases. I think what we need is a general across-the-board approach. So, as quite a lot of people probably do know, Reform want to change the threshold for which people start paying their income tax. So currently it's £12,570. We want to increase that to £20,000. So that will have a net effect of hundreds and hundreds for even when you look just at the average wage in the UK, which I think is something in the region of £33,000 from a recent article I read, which in itself will be benefit private, public sector, everybody who's working. And I think there needs to be this kind of attitude that when it comes to because we did have disruptions in Southampton, for example. So it's quite funny you mentioned Birmingham with the bin collections. But this was, I think, the end of 2023 and towards the start of 2024. There was a change in how bin collections in Southampton were organised. And instead of workers, the guys operating the lorries, heading home when they finished all of their tasks, they changed that. And it didn't work very well. It didn't seem like it was very well planned, and as a result, there was massive backlogs. I remember just on my street there was rubbish piling up. Admittedly, not quite to the level of Birmingham in that situation, but I think there needs to be a kind of better relationship with the unions to kind of say, well, okay, let's talk about this. Let's see what we can work out, rather than the approach which seems to have been taken, which is very knee-jerk, especially in locally in Southampton, and it doesn't seem like consultation was properly held and risk assessments weren't held, and that's a common issue, I think, with across Southampton's issues, is that there are lots of people telling them that this isn't going to work or this might not be a good idea, but it doesn't seem to be listened to so well, unfortunately.
So is it a case of negotiation over a more abrasive stance?
I think it depends on the situation. Obviously, I haven't seen too much on what's going on in Birmingham, admittedly, in that situation. I think in any case, negotiation is going to be preferable to kind of gunboat diplomacy, as it were, for use of a better term. But I certainly think with that example, there's three sides to any story. There's one person's side, there's another side, and there's the middle. I'd love to know where the middle was, but I'm hoping, for the sake of people in Birmingham, that this situation is getting close at least to being resolved somewhat.
So a proposal would be then for taxation across Southampton to be reduced, and obviously, as you said, the threshold be increased to £20,000. Would this be all taxes that you would be intending to reduce, to cut?
I wouldn't know about all taxes, but I can certainly say when it comes to, say, corporation tax, we want to reduce that to 15%, as well as scrapping IR35. So I'm sure quite a few businesses around the UK will be leaping for joy at the sound of that. And especially when it comes to a local issue, car parking, we want to restore free car parking. Something like 14 car parks had their free parking charge or tariff removed, which I think will have a serious knock-on effect to the local economy. So that much I can say.
And are there sort of positives in Southampton's economy that maybe the rest of the country hasn't sort of picked up on?
I think Southampton is quite an interesting case. Obviously, we have an airport. We have an international airport in nearby Eastleigh. We have the motorway connections, and we also have the port. So we do benefit from a lot of connections and a lot of infrastructure connecting us up to the rest of the country. I'm not saying I think that every town should have an airport. It would be impressive if we could, but I don't think that's quite feasible. But I think the infrastructure that we do have is in itself one of our biggest assets.
And do you think this is something that Southampton has sort of not utilised enough? That the potential for the city is there, the location, it's near London, and things like that. But do you think it's something that hasn't quite been maximised?
I would agree. No, I would agree, and I think not even in terms of something massive. I'm not proposing to build a giant ring road, or increase the ring road through Southampton or anything, and kind of the motorways. But I think certainly the connectivity that we have at Redbridge, for example, needs some eyes looking at and going, okay, could we improve this? Could we connect up, say, Totton, which currently has obviously the Totton bypass, Southampton, and I believe it's the M27, in a more efficient way. Other than that, internally, I think when it comes to the restrictions which are placed on how roads are working, our council is very good at saying, well, this is a rat run, we need to separate this off and create a bus gate and do this, that and the other. But actually the restrictions that they create leads to more congestion. It leads to people, like in the case of Portswood, with the Portswood bus gate, the biggest petition in Southampton City Council's history, asking to remove it, and 2 protests, and obviously Reform UK Southampton did get involved in supporting that motion, and then protecting car parks, which there are a couple which it looks like are going to be sold off in some quite busy kind of shopping areas. So with that in mind, we need to maximise, yes, what we have got and improve it, but I think also protect what we already have from potentially damaging changes. Cycle lanes are a bit of a funny subject in Southampton. It seemed like during COVID, everyone obviously was walking and cycling and being very healthy. So in infinite wisdom, a cycle lane was introduced down the avenue, one of our very busy roads. And it subsequently had to be amended and parts of it removed because it just wasn't working, and it was dangerous even in some aspects for the way it was implemented.
I suppose there's also a balance between public transport and cycling, and cars and lorries, etc. Because of course Southampton isn't great when it comes to traffic.
No.
So merely you don't want to create a situation where it just generates more traffic. So what would be the sort of policy on this in terms of trying to reduce congestion, but also by supporting commuters and people coming into the city?
I think, especially when it comes to the prospect of creating low traffic neighbourhoods and the fear of 15-minute cities, I think we need to avoid that. I think we need to avoid any notion of saying that we need to block off roads and create gates, as has, I think we've now got something like 2 or 3 existing bus gates, including Portswood, which hasn't been fully cancelled. Only the trial has been suspended, as the terminology goes. And when it comes to the implementation of anything to do with cycle lanes, we need to have a serious consideration about how we're narrowing roads, which is creating issues when it comes to, say, avoiding accidents, or a car which might have broken down on the side of the road, and it creates less space for people to get by. And when you start closing off roads, of course, it's all well and good to direct people to kind of your larger junctions, and trying to say, well, okay, use Thomas Lewis Way for near enough everything. But actually, when you look at it, you go, well, hang on, that's hundreds of people who could have avoided going on this busy route and actually taken a quicker route. You know, some of these guys might be doing just a short journey around the block, but now they have to join up to a main road to get round.
Made longer, yeah.
Exactly. So any kind of notion of saying, well, we're encouraging people to use other transport, it's not realistic. I'm sorry. It's
probably more nuanced as well. I mean, it depends on the context entirely. Because, of course, whenever I've been to Southampton, it's often been quite congested. Obviously, this is anecdotal. So there's definitely... I mean, this is probably a problem that has been going back years and years in terms of the sort of the road layout and the public transport coming into the city.
Yeah, definitely. And there are kind of... There's a few jokes that people in Southampton have, and actually one of them is that we have more traffic lights in Southampton than actual street lights sometimes, or that's how it feels when you're driving along. And when you catch one red light, you catch all of them. It's a very... I think we actually have the accolade of having the most traffic lights in one city, or something silly like that. I can believe it if it's true. But certainly a war on drivers and motorists, I don't think, is going to help people. A lot of justification the council gives is we want to encourage people to use other modes of transport. And that's all well and good. But if you're trying to get from one place, which might be well connected, to another place which isn't, your journey, which could have taken 10, 15 minutes in a car, has now taken the best part of an hour and longer if it's a round trip. So it needs some real efficiency. It needs some work. Creation of 20-mile-an-hour zones as well, I think, just increases the congestion in quite a few ways. But certainly one of our aims is to get Southampton moving. And certainly when it comes to more of the potential of a Reform UK government in Westminster, we definitely want to petition them to improve existing transport networks. I've lost count of the amount of times that we've had disruption on the rail networks because of signalling faults. You think after a few years of it happening that it would get fixed, but alas, maybe not. It's still there. So I think that's one of our long-term strategies anyway. We want to get the city moving, and therefore getting the economy growing. And especially when you have we have a lot of large lorries, we have a lot of vans, we have a lot of tradesmen, people who are coming maybe from Portsmouth or nearby, like Bournemouth on the other side. London, as you mentioned, has a lot of tourism and business coming down here. And certainly coaches to the docks to go on cruises. We need to improve that. And even something as simple as park and ride schemes, or shuttles going from the airport and back to a central location, or from the docks, would make a hell of a lot of sense.
I suppose as well, you have it's a trade hub, Southampton. So obviously you have a lot coming in from abroad, and they obviously come onto lorries and things. So any sort of clogging of that line can have real knock-on effects. Moving on to sort of crime now, is there a crime in Southampton over the last few years has slightly dipped, but it hasn't really experienced much movement. Is there any kind of particular headline policy that Reform have in terms of reducing crime?
Sure. I think one of our biggest approaches is saying, well, okay, we need a zero tolerance policing approach. A lot of people, when you talk to them, when you ask them what the police are like and how law and order and crime is functioning in this country, a lot of people feel like it's too soft, and I'm inclined to agree. I think we need to have more preventative action to say, well, okay, if you do this, there are serious jail terms, there's serious fines. I think a lot of people are now looking at what is actually handed out to people in court when they commit certain crimes, and they're not satisfied. They feel like it's not good enough, and that is only evidenced by reoffending rates. It's very interesting that you mentioned the trend in Southampton, because I've had a look at the crime stats myself. It's not something that we talk about too much on a branch level, but actually it is an important subject. When it comes to the trend over 10 years, we've seen the amount of, so from 2014 to 2024, the amount of crimes has doubled, which, when you hear that in 10 years, that's astonishing. The population has only increased something like 5% from 2011 through to 2021. So probably a little bit more when you account for that, but obviously the census being timed when it is. Anyway, point is, there are some very interesting trends there. So I think that a lack of prosperity and deprivation is certainly an issue in Southampton. It's quite a poignant subject. So I think that as the economy improves and as prospects improve, especially for younger people, I think that will lead to more people saying, well, okay, there's less of an incentive to go to crime. There's less of an incentive for that, because there are actually real opportunities with lower risks here, which are legal. I think the other thing to take into account as well, we need more police. And that's true across the entire country. So in our contract with the people, we wanted to have something like 40,000 new officers over the course of a 5-year parliament. And I think especially having the presence of a policeman in a high street or in a road, I think will prevent some of our headline crimes. Violence and sexual assault is one of our leading causes of crime in Southampton. And then quickly followed by shoplifting and burglary. Burglary, unfortunately, as it seems from some headlines around the country, some 50% are not even solved, unfortunately. So I think we're getting to a stage where our police forces are overwhelmed. They don't have the resources and they don't have the powers. Stop and search is one proponent of Reform UK as well, that we want to give more powers to the police to try and prevent things like knife crime, which has been proven to be effective in New York as a case study. So we think actually expanding those powers could be a big help and a preventative, as possession of knives and sharp objects has been quite a flat line from the statistics in Southampton. It's still continued to be there. It's not quite gone down just yet.
So what your reform are looking at essentially is if there's an increased police presence, people are less likely to commit crimes if there's a police officer just a few yards away. Is there also a look at sort of an education so that so crime never actually happens in the first place, to prevent it from taking hold? I'm not
so aware of anything like an education. Are you saying within secondary schools, primary schools, that kind of area?
Yes. So essentially, so that people never go into the life of crime in the first place because they're aware of maybe the risks. Obviously,
I think in a way, our approach to zero tolerance and actually showing, you demonstrate by example. If you hypothetically get into a gang and this gang has a member which is arrested and they're given a very serious charge, I think those gang members will think twice about committing the same crime, and that has ripple effects. That throughout society, people will look over and go, okay, there's an example of why I'm not going to do that. And actually, when it comes down to the idea of it, some people say, well, okay, being harsh, is that really going to solve the problem? No, it's not obviously going to stop all crime. There are still going to be people who will commit crime, but I think it will have a serious effect on reducing it. And I think especially, I mentioned reoffending rates earlier. One thing that Reform wants to look at is the idea of high-intensity training camps for young offenders, especially. When the young people obviously get into or start committing odd crimes, it can have a serious effect whereby they're not able to have a career. They don't have any kind of skills. They might come from, say, a low income area, or they might not have had the opportunities as other people coming from deprivation. So the chance, I think, to have a career or a trade or a skill, I think, would allow them to look at and go, well, actually, there is an option. There's I don't have to just go into stealing or burglary to get by. And I think it's quite unfortunate, because I think I can really sympathise with a lot of people when they say, well, the classic, I stole a loaf of bread to feed my family. Of course, anyone could sympathise with that. with the times being the way they are and money being shorter and shorter, I can completely understand it in a way. Does it make it right? Absolutely not. But I think, especially when it comes to serious crime, which is, I think, quite high in Southampton relatively to Hampshire as a general, we need to take serious action on it.
Of course, crime tends to go up when the economy is stretched and when people aren't doing as well. So I suppose this would obviously link to the economy massively.
Absolutely.
In terms of if the economy is doing well and people are feeling that they've got more money in the pocket, they're less likely to commit crime.
No, I agree. And actually having, you can look at many instances of it. People are going to do things because they need to. Obviously, you're going to have certain crimes which are going to be organised, but then you can have others where people are doing things because they are they have incentive. They have an incentive to do so. And I think, especially when you're luring people into committing crime, joining gangs and things like that, if the economy is doing well, if you've got a good paying job, you're able to look at affording a house and having a future on your current pathway, I think that is going to change someone's perspective massively. I've lost count of the amount of times where I've talked to people, and quite upsettingly, young people, who will turn to me and go, well, what's the point? I'm never going to own a home realistically within the next 10 years, even if I'm working hard and I'm saving hard. My prospects for a career are limited. Jobs are becoming harder to get or to hold. And even affording the basics, electricity and gas, insurance, all these things are going up and up and up, and then the taxes are not coming down, and wage growth is sluggish. So we can really see that people they're aware of these issues, but they almost feel despondent, which I think is it's quite soul destroying when you hear it too many times, I have to say. And being a relatively young person myself, it's quite poignant. It's quite marked when I see that, and I even look back at people that I went to school with, and I kind of look at, as you do on Facebook, you kind of snoop on people and go, well, okay, what are you doing now? And some people have done remarkably well. Others haven't had those opportunities, and that is quite upsetting. That even on minimum wage, they can't even have a minimum lifestyle. They can't get a single bed, or even a studio flat in some cases, which I remember when I was first looking at renting, I had to have a house share. That's the unfortunate reality a lot of people have to face.
The cost of living.
Yeah, the cost of living, and it's the tax burden is huge. It's not coming down anytime soon. It looks like under our current government, and it's potentially going to get worse with the implementation of wealth taxes, which look like they're going to be implemented. Which I think is not going to help the situation at all. And
do you think problems with the economy and inflation are going to sort of increase crime because people will just feel there's no alternative?
In a word, yes. In a very simple word, yes. I think that is going to cause more problems. It's going to present people less opportunities. Debt burdens already in terms of households, people going, well, okay, I need to actually use a credit card to survive and to buy food. People are going to feel like they have no other option. They're going to play the lottery, or they're going to inevitably going to have to commit crime or gamble or get these other things which are not going to inevitably help them.
And is crime one of the top issues that you're hearing about on the doorstep?
Luckily, not so much. I am hearing a little bit about antisocial behaviour in kind of local areas here. Crime is we do have instances where people do mention it, but it's not one of our top issues, I have to say, locally.